Now, there's been a very serious report from the campaign group, the Society for the Protection of Unborn Children, which reveals that UK taxpayer funds have been used to fund coerced abortions in China. The bombshell report has detailed that over a 2-year period, approximately £82 million of your money has been sent to communist China in aid of women and girls to access abortions. However, alarms were raised after the Chinese Communist Party put in place a system that reduced the Uyghur birth rate, including mandatory sterilizations and forced abortions. The report has found that since then at least 186,400 fewer children were born in Xinjiang. Now, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office has insisted that no UK aid is used to fund forced abortion practices in China. Well, joining me now is the author of the report, Alithea Williams, Public Policy Manager at the Society for the Protection of Unborn Children. Alithea, this is really important, that we know that China forces abortions. Actually, I discovered at your meeting earlier today that you're now allowed 3 children, so it's the 4th child who would be aborted. And as I am, in fact, the 4th child, I noted that quite strongly, that people just are not allowed to live because of China's policy. And you have evidence that the Foreign Office is funding this.
Well, so there's certainly evidence that we're still giving aid to China. So this shouldn't be the case. In 2011, the then Department for International Development said they were going to cut all development aid to China. But what we found is that money is still going from other departments. And also for the Foreign Office itself, there's, I'd say, a lack of transparency in where money is being spent. So they said there was a 95% cut, but the Independent Commission for Aid Impact, where we got a lot of these figures from, said that this figure is, and I quote, misleading at best. And it said that this only applies to a certain stream of funding, which was aid spent in China. But then there was other aid that was counted as aid with China. So
not all aid that's spent in China is spent by the Foreign Office. It can go via other departments and into organisations, including UN organisations, that may then provide funds to forced abortion providers in China.
Yes, so kind of another stream is the money that we give to these international family planning organisations, so-called. So the International Planned Parenthood Federation and the United Nations Population Association. They both are active in China. So, for instance, IPPF, the China Family Planning Association, which carries out all these policies, has been an IPPF member since 1983.
And receives money from the IPPF?
Yes, it does, yeah.
So the money is going from the UK government to an international organisation, to the Chinese organisation that carries out forced abortion. So there is a clear link from British taxpayers through to forced abortions.
Exactly, yes.
And that must be very worrying for people, regardless of their view of abortion. I mean, many of the viewers may know my view on abortion, but that even if you are in favour of a woman's choice, this is denying women choice because they are having children taken out of their wombs. They are not allowed to carry a birth to full term.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of terrifying because it hits at one of the most personal, kind of private things, the right to have children. I mean, people might say now, well, China's relaxed its policies. You're allowed 3 children. Well, you'll know you have more than 3 children yourself. The idea of the state telling you how many children you can have is just abhorrent. And just because they relaxed it to 3 doesn't mean the state-enforced coercive policy is not in place. And then it's particularly egregious what's happening to the minority populations in Xinjiang. And there's very recent evidence of forced abortions there.
And this figure of the decline in number of births of the Uyghurs in Xinjiang, that is the whole of the Planned Parenthood effort by the Chinese state. So they won't all be abortions, but they will be simply stopping the Uyghurs having children, full stop.
Yeah, so it's not just abortions, so there is a lot of that. There's forced sterilizations, forced implantations of intrauterine devices. And, well, the Associated Press just talked about a climate of terror around having children. So, women and families just having to hide their children. There's one story we report here of a man with 4 children, and he was like hiding them under carts, when they were going into town, ended up running away for a time because the authorities were after them. It's just that kind of atmosphere there.
And they tell women that once they've had one child, they've got to wait 4 years for the next, that it's an ordered parenthood. You're not allowed freely to have your 3 children. You have to do it according to the rules of the state. And they will ask your neighbours to spy on you and use coercive measures to take control of women's fertility.
Yeah, exactly. It's just something we can't even really imagine here. The idea of the state having oversight of, when women are having periods, when they're planning to have their children. And even if the state is maybe not cracking down quite as much as they were in some areas, because they're now worried about the huge demographic crisis they're facing brought by their own policies, we're seeing that employers are now doing this. Women are being subjected to pregnancy checks and being asked about their child rearing plans in job interviews. And
you've launched the report recently. Why has the Foreign Office not been extremely concerned about this? It just seems to have said, no, we're not doing this, move along, please. Is there a feeling that abortion is just generally a good thing, and therefore to challenge the Chinese on forced abortions would be overstepping the mark?
I do think there is an element of that. I think the narrative in this country can be so much that abortion is an empowering thing. It's a woman's right. It's what people need. And, regardless of whether people agree on that, I think we should all be able to agree that being forced into an abortion is a terrible thing. But I think if you've got in your mind abortion is an empowering thing, it's just a bit uncomfortable to think that it's actually being used as a tool of human rights abuse, as it is in China.
And that's the fundamental point, that this is a human rights abuse in China that is very well documented, but unfortunately is being funded by British taxpayers.
Yeah, exactly. So nothing we're saying here is really new. I've pulled stuff from the Independent Commission for Aid Impact, just from stuff that's already been out there. It's not new. We're just kind of pulling these sources together from the Uyghur Tribunal as well. So it's just really about bringing these issues together and bringing it to light.
Well, thank you very much, Alithea. We asked the Chinese embassy for comment, but not surprisingly, we haven't heard back.